Okay, thank you so much for being here again. It's been quite a successful Adventures in Living this summer, I think. Today we have Phyllis Saarinen from Colorado, actually. She's out there on top of a mountain somewhere. And then next week we'll have Neil Hollingshead from Michigan. And I will be in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So, as Sheila will be out there too. So maybe you'll see the two of us on Zoom if we get up early enough. That's the secret operative. Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Debbie Dean now, and she will introduce Phyllis. And then at the end, we'll see if we have any questions, and Pam will handle those. And then Jane and I can also run around in the Oak Room with microphones. But anyway, welcome. We're glad you're here. And Debbie.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Adventures in Living. And Phyllis was kind enough to forward an introduction to me from Colorado, so I will proceed with the good words that she wrote. She says, "As I grew up in other countries and have traveled extensively, I consider myself an internationalist, as well as a participating American citizen. During the 37 years that I was married to Arthur, my life was filled with civic volunteerism, serving on local and state government committees and commissions, while also finishing college and graduate school. I was born in Philadelphia, but soon was moving around the world as my father worked for the Voice of America. On one hand, given the uneven quality of schooling, my childhood formal education suffered, and contact with my extended family was very limited. On the other hand, being exposed to other cultures and languages gave me a broad international outlook and understanding of other countries." And her presentation today is titled, "Rafting, the Cascading Rapids of Life." Life is a series of adventures, some intended and welcome, while others not so much. Some adventures are the result of planning and anticipating the consequences. Some are the result of uninformed non-decisions. Quote, "Not to decide is to decide." All those decisions create an intertwined cascade of lifelong adventures, for better or for worse. Okay.
Hi, thanks for watching. I'm a little bit shy about talking about my life and how much of it to share. But in thinking about this, preparing for this event, I realized that my life has been a cascade of choices. Some choices made by myself and some by others. Like boulders in a riverbed, the course of my life has formed in a rippling or even turbulent cascade. Some of my choices are the result of planning and anticipating the consequences. Others are the result of an uninformed non-decision. And I've observed that others in my family have done that too. Not to choose is yet a choice. All our choices contribute to a cascade of experiences and conditions in our lives, for better or for worse. There were at least two foundational choices that I made for myself. The first was when I did not have the courage to end a relationship with a man I didn't love or even like, and wound up marrying the man, Neil, which proved to be a major mistake. At age 20, I didn't know how to be assertive with what today we would call sexual harassment in the workplace. 8 years and 2 children later, in order to exit that abusive relationship, I learned how to be assertive thanks to a counselor I remember as my fairy godmother. After months of talking to her, I understood that good things happen when I assert my priorities and my needs. The second foundational adventure began on a snowy January night of 1978 in downtown Boston in the lounge of the swank Parker House Hotel. I was in a circle of office colleagues having a glass of wine before dinner, and as my eyes wandered around the group, I noticed someone I didn't know across the circle. Catching my eye, the handsome man pointed to his nose, then to me, and jerked his thumb towards the exit. I pretended not to notice. After all, I had not been introduced to Arthur Saarinen, although I knew he was a senior officer in the Fort Lauderdale office. Besides, I had heard he was married. But to start at the beginning, some of my ancestors chose to immigrate to the American colonies. In fact, all of them did, well before the American Revolution, and some had that choice made for them. My mother's ancestors were largely German, French, and some English, as well as a Swiss woman somewhere, and maybe even an Ashkenazi Jew. And according to a distant cousin in Ohio whose life's work is tracing ancestors. But 23andMe also detected in my female ancestors a fairly rare female mitochondrial DNA, common only among the Basques and the reindeer herders of northern Scandinavia. What a mystery. Unfortunately, it's difficult to trace female ancestry in this country, since prior to the mid-1800s, brides' surnames were not routinely recorded on marriage licenses or census lists. I cannot identify the mother of my great-great-grandmother, Susan Rowland, from whom our line of women inherited that mystery mitochondrial DNA. Indeed, I never knew my great-grandmother, Anna Mills Reynard, mother of 9, and my mother's grandmother. Only 2 of the girls had children. None of the other of Anna's 9 children married or had children of their own. And it was a good thing, because I've discovered that I have 150 distant cousins in Ohio, where my own grandmother has only 9. My father's Park family, that's P-A-R-K with an E, as originally it existed until the 1820s, when my dad's ancestors dropped the E from the end. My father's family was sure their ancestors were from Scotland, but thanks to 23andMe's analysis of my nephew's DNA, we know Dad's male DNA haplogroup is definitely Irish, related to the legendary Niall of the 9 Hostages, founder of a long-enduring dynasty of 4th century AD Irish chieftains. The so far earliest identified ancestor of Dad's Park family line, Roger Park, chose to immigrate to the New Jersey colony in 1685 from Lancashire, England. Unfortunately, Dad died before we discovered all that. Instead, after doing earlier research in Edinburgh in the 1980s, he believed that his family name descended from a Scottish Presbyterian Covenanter shipped to New Jersey as a slave in the mid-1600s. Yes, there were thousands of such Covenanters from Scotland executed or enslaved by the English Anglican King James I. The lucky ones were sent to the American and Caribbean plantations in the 1600s. Even some scholars of U.S. history are unaware of that catastrophe. What I also learned from 23andMe is that my genetics are almost half Irish. And where did those Irish genes come from, primarily? As well as Dad's male line, those genes came from my sweet grandmother, Lily Moyne Park. She had 4 grandparents who chose to leave Ireland in the early 1800s, with the Irish or Celtic family names of Lloyd and Dillon, as well as Moyne. Could Dad's family really not have known that? I was in Ireland on a tour last spring, and I definitely want to return soon to explore more of that background. It's incredible to think that after the Civil War and the freedom that formerly black slaves enjoyed, and the discrimination that was foisted against them, that the same sort of discrimination was practiced against the Irish immigrants to this country. It's not understandable to me. So I was born in Philadelphia on Sunday, July 11th, 1943, in the middle of World War II. My mother, Miriam Nay Park, was 22 and had been awarded her RN degree a year before. My father, Edward, too old to be drafted, was 37. She became pregnant by perhaps a non-choice to continue a relationship because she felt sorry for Edward Park, a socially awkward man 15 years older with an 8th grade education. After I was old enough at age 14 to realize that my conception was the reason she married Edward, I felt responsible when I saw she was sad. A few months after I was born, Dad chose to fulfill his wartime duty by signing up as a radio engineer with the Office of War Information and was transferred to Algiers for 2 years. Mom and I stayed in the Philadelphia area and lived in a big old house we shared with other young mothers. After the war, the Office of War Information became the voice of America. So Dad's choice dictated the rest of his life as well as those of Miriam, my younger brother Donald, and me. Since I didn't have to share her attention with anyone else while he was gone, I became very close to my mother. When Dad returned, I was fearful of him. He rejected me, and that set the tone of their relationship for the rest of my life, or I should say his life. So began my childhood of international gypsyhood, living in many different locations in 4 different countries. Our first overseas assignment was Oahu, Hawaii, in 1946-48, at that time a U.S. territory. And it was paradise for my parents. Yes, I have vivid memories of the beaches and the inland village where we lived. There was no kindergarten, but there was a Polynesian mixed-race family across the street, and I played with those children while my parents took turns working shifts. I have returned to Hawaii several times, the most recent time being my son's Ironman competition in 2009. Dad's second assignment was in Munich in fall 1948. Mom and I followed in February 1949. Germany was still reeling from the war. Much of 1,000-year-old Munich was in rubble, and even some of the homes in our pleasant neighborhood had been destroyed by stray Allied bombs. We adopted a German family to live with us, Frau und Herr Schaller, and their pretty 19-year-old daughter, Gertie. Frau Schaller became my surrogate grandmother, and my mother stayed in touch with them for many years after we had long left Germany. Almost all American families living in houses requisitioned from German owners had displaced widows living with them as maids, and most of them were thankful to have their own bedroom and bath, food, and a salary. With rampant inflation, many Germans were unable to afford luxuries such as tea, coffee, cigarettes, hosiery, and they would come to the door with handmade lace tablecloths, sparkling leaded cut glass, and other items Americans might like to trade for. We acquired Putzi, a pedigreed dachshund, that way. Early in that 1949 spring, Dad took Mom and me to the Nazi Holocaust Dachau camp. In my stark memory, the place was deserted, cold, damp, and grimy with a certain odor to it. I couldn't hear Dad's whispered explanation to Mom, but the ghosts told me it was a place of evil and tragedy. Then, not long after, the 3 of us went to the ruins of Hitler's Eagle's Nest, high on the side of a Bavarian mountain above the town of Berchtesgaden. Broken glass crunched under our feet. Again, I didn't understand the significance of the place, but now as a student of European history with a particular interest in World War II and the rise of Hitler and fascism, I very much understand what those places represented and how those events may be mirrored now. In July of 1949, Mom gave birth to Donald William Park, 9 days short of my own 6th birthday. Dad acted as though he had no part in that, consistent with his lack of fathering or involvement in household affairs. In retrospect, I wonder if my father had a mild Asperger syndrome. He avoided eye contact with others, was uncomfortable in social settings, didn't speak directly to either Don or me, and even would stand outside of my bedroom door out of sight if he had something to say to me, which he generally avoided doing in any case. Several months later, in early 1950, we were transferred from Munich directly to Tangier, Morocco, across the Strait of Gibraltar from Spain. After several days in a downtown hotel, we settled into a new house on the outskirts of the city. I could see the Rock of Gibraltar from the dining room window. Although there was an American-run school, Mom placed me in a French school where the teacher didn't speak English, and certainly at age 7, I didn't speak French, although I'd picked up some German Bavarian dialect from the maid. Dad didn't get along with his boss, so a year or so later we were transferred back to the U.S. temporarily, and my parents chose to leave me with Dad's sister, Aunt Mimi, in Havertown outside of Philadelphia. I was to attend the last few months of second grade, and I was very anxious and tearful to enter yet another new school. Seeing my mother drive off without me for an undefined period was emotionally jarring for me at age 7, and I was sickly for several months. However, living with Dad's sister, Aunt Mimi, Uncle Earl, and Grandma Lily was a positive experience, as they didn't argue and fight as my parents had. I learned from those adults a better way of relating than I saw between my parents. One of the highlights of that visit was dressing up for Halloween and trick-or-treating in the neighborhood. In fall 1951, we were sent to Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, a medium-sized island off the southern tip of India. The capital, Colombo, was very British at that time, having recently changed their status from a British colony to a member of the British Commonwealth. I have vivid memories of the 2.5 years we were there, like celebrating the coronation of Queen Elizabeth at the British European Swim Club. Again, though there was an American school, Mom chose to place me in a Catholic girls' school where I was the only non-Ceylonese, non-Catholic person except for Mother Superior Mary from Long Island, New York. I rode to school every day in a coolly drawn rickshaw, wearing a white cotton uniform dress with green necktie. Over grades 3 to 5, I learned British spelling and decimals before fractions. The United States and its history held no relevance for me, and I didn't know anything about it. But I did learn the ancient history of Ceylon, made more meaningful when Mom and I explored the ruins of ancient capitals of Anuradhapura and Polonnaruwa. I learned about the great king Parakamabahu. The American families associated with the U.S. Embassy lived elsewhere across the area, and my only friend was an English girl, Bridget, whose family was happy to have me at their house, and I was even invited to a bonfire celebration of the historic Guy Fawkes Day, as well as sometimes Sunday afternoon tea. Back to the States and Philadelphia again in spring 1954 to live with Aunt Mimi while attending the last few weeks of 5th grade in the same elementary school as before. This time I was expected already to be familiar with U.S. geography, of course I wasn't, and to be able to manipulate fractions, which the school taught, before decimals. These things are important. I was unfamiliar with the games that children played in recess and had a slight British accent. My clothes were strange, and so I was ignored by other children. In July 1954, we returned to Munich. By now, Munich was in the process of reconstruction thanks to the Marshall Plan, and the historic center of the city, the Rathaus, or City Hall, museums and other government buildings were being rebuilt according to the original plans, which had been carefully safeguarded during the war. And if you go back if you go to Munich, and as I have a couple of times, I am truly amazed at that city and what they have done. For the first 2 years of that 5-year assignment in Munich, we lived in a big, beautiful home with a huge backyard and fruit trees and fruit bushes where neighborhood American kids came to play cowboys and Indians. The story we heard about that house was that it had been built for Hitler's secretary's mother. When I returned to Munich in probably 1999, I went back to the same neighborhood, and I was literally crying to discover that that house had been razed, and instead there were apartment buildings on that lot. It was as if part of my life had been eliminated. The U.S. Army base in Munich was very large, with many families accompanying the officers and soldiers, so the school was also very large and supplied with highly qualified American teachers. During those 5 years, I overcame my shyness, born of being without a community of friends for the first 12 years of my life, and I discovered my interest and aptitude for math and science. In 1959, however, Dad chose to apply for a position in West Berlin, working for the Radio in American sector, now Radio Berlin. Unfortunately, that meant transferring to a much smaller school with science and math teachers who were not qualified in those areas. It seems to me now that my parents had little concern for their children's education or intellectual development. Certainly, they hadn't checked into the school situation before deciding to move to Berlin, and why ever would Mom have enrolled me in a French school in Tangier, Morocco? Their deliberate but uninformed choice greatly affected my future and my brother's as well. Nevertheless, living in different cultures under widely varying circumstances has given me a broad international perspective and informs my enjoyment of cultural differences wherever I find them. I graduated as the salutatorian of my senior class in Berlin Military Dependent School. There were only 30 of us in the class, but still, I was taking the tougher courses in science and math. Apparently, seeing me on a stage in front of an auditorium of people giving a speech at the graduation ceremony didn't motivate my father to pay for a college education for his female child. While finally he did agree to pay for 2 years in an AA program at George Washington University, which was his choice of that private school, he reneged at the end of the first year. I managed to borrow $2,000, and with the money earned over the summer of '62, typing in the basement of the Pentagon, I finished a second year at GW in 1963 and began taking night courses while working for a Department of Defense contractor. Then followed that second foundational choice I mentioned at the beginning, my non-choice to marry the wrong man, Neil Weiner. In 1964, we both worked for the same team for a Department of Defense contractor in Northern Virginia. It didn't occur to me that I could go to the retired general who led our study team, or even confide in the senior secretary who worked at the desk next to mine. I lacked even the confidence to request a transfer to another division, let alone to find a new job. I just did what I thought I was supposed to do as a woman, submit. Neil had a Harvard PhD, but like Dad, he would not support my education. We planned the birth of both of our children, Heather in 1968 and Garrett in 1971. But like my father, Neil was uninvolved, especially after the birth of the son he demanded. Like my father, Neil was emotionally detached from me. His emotional and verbal abuse became physical during my second pregnancy. I learned later that is the typical pattern of an abuser. So after I separated from Neil in 1973, of course, money and child care were issues for me with 2 small children. I chose to accept a secretarial position with a small environmental engineering office, another deliberate and informed choice. But my salary plus Neil's alimony supported the 3 of us just above the federal poverty line. Fortunately, as I had with my earlier job with the Defense Department contractor, in the new job, over 4 years, I received rapid promotions and salary increases. Fast forward to November 1977. I chose to leave my job now as the office administrator in the small engineering office and accepted a middle management promotion in the Boston headquarters of that firm, Camp Dresser and McKee. My informed and deliberate choice to transfer was the key determinant of the rest of my life and those of my children, Heather, then 9, and Garrett, 6 years old. October 1978. The phone on my desk rings. Hello, this is Phyllis. Hi, this is Art Saarinen. I want to thank you for expediting the EPA River Basin contract. That was very helpful. Gosh, it's the man who beckoned to me that snowy night in January. You're very welcome. That's my job. Long pause. Is there anything else I can help you with? Well, yes, I'm going to be in Boston next week. Would you have dinner with me? Oh, that would be very nice. And so began the rest of my life, though I didn't know it at the time. Instead, I thought, if this man thinks he has a warm bed in Boston, he's got another thing coming. But I checked around the office. Art Saarinen has a sterling reputation, and the division president, whose office is 2 doors down from mine, has apparently been playing matchmaker. My office girlfriends were all a Twitter. Ooh, Arthur Saarinen. By February 1979, and after 3 more dates, that handsome man I had ignored on a snowy night the year before, Arthur Saarinen, Senior Vice President for Southeast Operations of Camp Dorser-McKee, respectfully asked me to marry him. By then, I knew that was what I wanted to do. We married on April 21st, 1979, and my children and I moved to Fort Lauderdale, where he had built his career since 1951. What followed was an amazing marriage that allowed Arthur and me, as well as our merged family of 3 children, to grow and succeed in many ways. I became a mother for Arthur's then 4-year-old son, who was basically abandoned by his mother. Arthur said years later that I saved his life after his 2 previous devastating marriages, and possibly his son's as well. I felt that he too had given me the support and freedom to discover who I could be. He supported my children's education and mine as well. I earned a BS with honors in accounting at FAU in May 1983, and in June we moved to Seminole County, north of Orlando. Arthur and I chose to make that move for a better public school education for our children and for an improved social environment for them as well. Finding no job offers for a 40-year-old accounting graduate, my decision instead to become active in the League of Women Voters, as I had been during earlier years when I was not working. That led to a gubernatorial appointment to the Florida Environmental Regulation Commission in 1987, where I was the only woman on the 7-person commission. My issue positions on the commission were informed both by my work experiences with the environmental engineering firm, Camp Dorser-McKee, and my time as the Environmental Studies Chair of the Fairfax County League of Women Voters and President of the Seminole County League. And it seemed that the other members of the commission respected my positions. I believe that our marriage enhanced Arthur's career as well as mine. Since I had worked for the same engineering firm, I understood what he did and the people and issues he dealt with. I enjoyed entertaining his clients and colleagues in our beautiful homes in Fort Lauderdale and after 1983 in Seminole County. We agreed that he would volunteer to become an officer of an international professional association, the Water Environment Federation. He ultimately served as president from 1985 to 1990. In that position, he was expected to travel and speak at many national and international conferences. I supported that demanding role he had, often accompanying him to conferences and conventions where I attended technical sessions and enjoyed interacting with potential clients, colleagues, and officials at his side during black tie dinners. In fact, I think of those as the glory years, when multiple black tie dinners around the country and indeed the world meant that I wore beautiful gowns, and we stayed in the president's suite of elegant hotels from New York, Dallas, and San Francisco to Honolulu, Vancouver to Japan to Munich and Cape Town, and even Quito, Ecuador. In November 1990, as Arthur anticipated retirement, we moved to Alachua County, Arthur's ancestral home, where we built a house on 120 acres that had belonged to his grandfather. With our children out of the house by then, I pursued a master's degree in resource economics at the University of Florida. That led to my organizing and managing a consulting group for 4 years. 1993 to 1997. Resource Economics Consultants, my team of 4 professors and up to 10 postdocs, all under contract, worked on projects for the Southwest Florida Water Management District, the St. John's District, and other water-related studies under contract to a national engineering firm. After Arthur retired in 1994 and my consulting group faded away in 1997, we enjoyed community service projects. He was invited to teach in the UF Environmental Engineering Department and served 8 years on the Alachua County Planning and Zoning Commission. I was appointed to the County Economic Development Advisory Committee, the Regional Transportation Citizen Advisory Committee, and the Gainesville Water Management Committee. After 7 years living in western Alachua County, having our front gate stolen and often having to pick up all sorts of disgusting trash that people had thrown on the half mile of roadside in front of our property, we decided we were not really country people. So we sold the house and 40 acres, donated the other 80 acres to Alachua Conservation Trust, and built our perfect house in northwest Gainesville in 1999. In 2001, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Fortunately, it was barely detectable, so the treatment was only surgery and radiation. But the psychological impact of that diagnosis stimulated my choice to spend more time doing just what I wanted to do, what interested me. So I began auditing UF courses in geology, paleontology, and archaeology. I volunteered at the Florida Museum in various departments and participated in several fossil digs in North Florida, South Dakota, and even Oregon. Learning and doing in scientific areas was my idea of heaven. In 2002, after observing my stress while moving my mother from one level of housing or nursing care to another as she deteriorated mentally and physically, Arthur said, "I never want you to have to go through that for me. Let's sign up for OCAMIC." Yeah. We made that well-informed choice together. Not that our 37 years together were all a bed of roses, but the few times we disagreed strongly, we discussed our differences and came to agreements without shouting insults or sulking. In 2004, we moved into the wonderful OCAMIC community as founding members, and we're very comfortable in our new life here. Arthur enjoyed the woodworking shop and built several items, often with my help. For me, OCAMIC was stimulating in many ways, certainly including ILR. The opportunity to help start up various activities like the Natural History Society and the Oak Leaf was wonderful. I had a new experience of living within a group of people who mostly accepted me for who I am. In retrospect, I wonder if Arthur was somehow prescient of the then undiagnosed neuromuscular disease that would slowly take his life. After we decided he would move to assisted living and our costs increased, it was clear to me that if I stayed at OCAMIC, I would be out of money before I'm out of years. My parents both lived to their mid-90s, so have an expectation of living to 100, presumably doing just what I was doing in my 60s. Dream on. By 2014, I chose to buy a modest condo about 15 minutes away and stayed closely involved with Arthur and his care. I joined him for meals, took him in a wheelchair to Gator baseball games, and for drives in the country, and even to Sarasota to visit his son and grandkids. My mother had been in a Gainesville nursing home with increasing dementia since 2003, and I was closely involved in her care as well as Arthur's. Unfortunately, none of our children lived in Gainesville, nor did they have the inclination or time to spend with Arthur or my mother. They did nothing to support me as he and Mom deteriorated, and if anything, my daughter and stepson perhaps relieved their own stress over Arthur's deterioration by being antagonistic. Those years of stress damaged my health, requiring remedial surgery. Mom died in January 2016, and Arthur passed in May 2016. His celebration of life at OCAMIC was attended by more people than could be seated in the Oak Room. Several friends, colleagues, and relatives flew from across the country, but disappointingly, not my daughter in Seattle, nor my son in Singapore. Arthur asked that his ashes be scattered at the base of a live oak tree, and so with a small group of his closest relatives and friends, his son Justin and 2 grandchildren, we followed his wishes at the Saarinen Preserve of Alachua Conservation Trust. His spirit lives on in the 80 acres of oaks, black cherry, and longleaf pines that we donated to ACT. I took Mom's ashes to her family plot in Valley Forge National Cemetery, where her grandparents, her father's, and Dad's ashes are also interred. In September of 2016, a new person came into my life. My son Garrett's little girl, Celeste Phyllis Weiner, was born in Singapore. Her mother, Kath Pangsolingen, was Garrett's partner for 7 years and is a successful businesswoman originally from Manila. Unfortunately, their relationship turned sour about 9 months after the baby was born, so he moved out of their apartment. It was traumatic for him as he loves that child. Fortunately, Kath agreed to his having Celeste with him 3 days a week during the remaining several years he lived in Singapore. I visited them in November of 16, April of 17, the spring of 2018, and fall of 2019. The COVID pandemic put an end to my travels to Singapore, and now at age 82, I would not be able to tolerate that 2-day trip with a total of over 24 hours in the air. During the difficult years of Arthur's and Mom's deterioration, especially 2014 to 2016, my support came from a few close friends in Oak Hammock and one friend not in Oak Hammock, Andrew Pierce, who lived in Miami. I came to know Andrew, whose parents lived at Oak Hammock, when one day we passed in the hall by the grill. He was walking with his father, who I recognized as Frank, but I'd never seen Andrew before. But he knew of me from his parents, and as we passed, he turned to me saying, "I understand you're interested in science." "Well, yes. I'd like to talk to you about it for some time." "Okay, I'm in the directory. Give me a call." Over a period of a few years, when he was in town to see his father, we'd get together over tea or walk around the Oak Hammock property, sharing our interests in various fields of science. You have to understand that this is important to nerds like Andrew and me. No one else in the world has ever been willing to listen to my excitement over learning the latest hypothesis of plate tectonics in North America, or the evolution of lemurs in Madagascar, the recent discovery of a pre-Neolithic site in Turkey. Andrew had the same experiences. No one wanted to hear about his thought experiments in cosmology, his experiments to detect anomalies in the Earth's gravitation during eclipses, his thoughts about the meaning of time. But I knew enough about those sorts of topics that I could engage with him. Some months after Arthur died, Drew told me, "I've fallen in love with you." And so I made another major choice: to spend my remaining years loving a sweet, kind man who thinks the world of me. A man with whom I share many interests and a joy and love of learning and travel. Yes, I'm excited, and we're planning more travel. Together we enjoy owning and sharing a small house in a lovely neighborhood. These will be my golden years.
Wow, Phyllis, thank you. I'm exhausted. Yeah. Do you have any other comments that you'd like to share, as long as you're here with us? And then we'll ask for questions, memories, and so forth.
Well, that was pretty detailed already. I'm not sure what more I can add, except that you understand that we're enjoying 2 months of the summer in Colorado, and this is the sort of thing that Drew and I do. We hike to the extent that I'm able to. It seems that I now have a severe arthritic deterioration of my spine, which makes it somewhat painful for me to walk long distances, but we do what we can. But yeah, if anybody wants to hear more detail, I'm happy to oblige.
Okay, thank you. One special thing here, and I think Phyllis is tired of hearing me say this. I have the privilege of living in the villa on the street that Phyllis and Art designed. And it's quite, on the outside, it looks like all the rest of them, but on the inside, it's quite different and a very comfortable house to live in. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Diane. Yes, we decided to move some walls, to eliminate some walls, change the arrangement in the kitchen, and that cost us an extra $25,000. But we lived in that villa for 6 years.
And
So
I've been there for almost 14 now, so
yeah.
it's a real privilege. It really is. And I invite you to come over if you're walking by sometime and knock on the door. I may or may not answer, but give it a try. Okay. Any other comments? Jane and I are here. And are there any questions on Zoom, Pam? Okay. Jane, can you?
The question says, Phyllis, question regarding your stained glass work.
Okay. Well, one thing I didn't mention is that starting in about 1985, somehow I found the time to discover my impulse for creating artwork. And that included stained glass. I like to work with my hands, and I started taking classes in stained glass, especially after I finished all that intellectual stuff with graduate school and working and so forth. I signed up with the McIntyre Stained Glass Gallery in Thornbrook, and found that I enjoyed it very much. And so, yeah, I have I've given away a lot of things as gifts, and but I have several items hanging in the house now. So, yeah, at some point I'm going to bequeath my equipment to the Okamic stained glass workshop.
Wonderful. I'm sure Keith Berg would be happy to hear that. Okay.
Yeah,
Keith is, Alice. Let me see if I can get over to you, Alice.
Thank you. Well, hi, Phyllis and Drew. It's lovely to see you two in Colorado. And I'm just sorry you're out there because we were going to have you come to lunch. little tricky, but keep having a good time. And thanks for your presentation this morning.
Thank you, Alice. Maybe Drew will take me out for lunch today. Hint, hint.
Sure, of course.
and I'll add that it was fascinating labyrinth of a life, and I'm wondering if it's Drew who has who you've discussed with about the cosmology theories and so on. I wonder, could you briefly comment on some of that cosmology?
Drew?
Well, briefly, I don't know. I mean, that encompasses what, 13 billion years of history of the universe, I guess. But cosmology generally deals with the creation of the universe and its evolution since that time. So it all started, according to the current paradigm, with the Big Bang, and that is integrally related with the concept of time. What does time mean? What is time? How are time and space related? This is something that Einstein dealt with, and for the moment in any case, has pretty much nailed down in terms of the current thinking and the current research and the current, as I say, paradigm to explain the universe. And I'm very interested in that, and I've done a lot of reading in it. I have some of my own ideas about it, but how valid they are, I really don't know. But it's very fun to think about it. And finally, I found somebody in Phyllis that I could talk with about it. And she was willing to listen to me.
Well, there's probably a few others here who would enjoy to hear what you had to say about that when you're in town. Yes.
There was an ILR program, I believe last spring on cosmology. It conflicted with another one of my activities, which is my brain exercise with bridge. So I didn't attend that. There will be I'm facilitating a program in the fall term on the solar system and how it organized and why, for example, Earth is different in that it supports life than any of the other planets. So I hope people will find it interesting. And
I think it's because we have McDonald's here.
McDonald's.
Well, that supports life.
Oh, I'm not. I question that. I question that.
Okay.
Well,
I think that's an unscientific conclusion.
Well, many of us are looking forward to that course
Thank you.
on the solar system. So,
Thank you.
Hi, this is Joan Langley. I didn't get to know you really because I moved in 2014. However, loved everything I've heard about you and have seen because I visited your house with Diane. And I love the layout and so on. Do you have any little mottos? Like most of us have something stuck up to remind us of something. Do you have anything on your refrigerator or on your desk?
Well, on the refrigerator are magnets from our lots of trips. Before Drew and I decided to live together, I noticed that on his refrigerator in his apartment in Miami, he had pictures of his former girlfriend. Needless to say, that is not on our refrigerator.
They're not up there anymore, of course.
But a motto. What the heck? A motto. You might say that my motto is to be assertive while also being considerate of other people's priorities and feelings. But as you heard me talk about, I spent too much of my life submitting to others and not even understanding that I might have or should have priorities for myself. So Drew and I get along so well together, in spite of our 13-year age difference. Arthur was 16 years older than I. And as I said, I made a choice to be with him. And it turned out very well. And I think Drew and I have made an informed choice to be together. And we are getting along very well. So it's the theme of my talk, I realized in composing it, was making choices, recognizing that your life is full of choices. And for example, I married Neil Weiner because I didn't know how to get away from him. pretty sad, actually. But the result of being in that marriage in which I found I was a doormat and had to get out somehow made me a stronger person. Had I not married him, I wouldn't be the same person that I am now. So, in a way, that was a very positive thing, but it was very painful and very difficult part of my life. That's the way life is. It's, as I said, it's a cascade, like a stream in a river, and like a stream in the rocky course, boulders underneath, a cascade of turbulence. That was a turbulent time for me because I, at times, was so depressed I was suicidal.
I think one of the things that guides Phyllis, though, these days, and I know for many years in the past, long before I ever knew her, is this quest for knowledge, this desire to be involved in current events or local events, political events, but also to enjoy every day, to the fullest. And that's what she does.
Yeah. Also, being Okamic was a significant choice and a significant experience for me. As you might have seen from those slides, of being in the Golden Gators and the Okamic Sisters, the quartet that Rhoda Swirlick and I organized. We had such fun with that, and singing in the chorus. And I remember sitting with oh gosh, I've forgotten her name. Green,
Nan Green.
Nancy Green, who was the director of the Okamic Chorus, and we sat down for lunch when we were both brand new here, and I learned that she had been a high school music teacher and a chorus director. I said, "Oh, let's organize a chorus," and so that's what she did. And a lot of that sort of evolved. The Natural History Society at Okamic evolved because there were two gentlemen now deceased who were scientists, biologists, zoologists, and they set the table for that. And the quilters, the Okamic needlers. And they were doing good works. They were, we all had knitting projects and quilting projects. I don't quilt, but I knit. And it was just such great fun. And
Thank you, Phyllis. We have a question here from Sybil.
Hello, I talked to you earlier when you were here this year for another presentation. And I want to follow up on your connection and editorship of the Oak Leaf. It was very important, I think, to the development of this community. And in the past year, a great deal has been accomplished in terms of the role of Okamic and the Oak Leaf and the history of this place that has been picked up and followed up by other residents. So when I talked to you, I asked you if you would be interested in seeing the pages of the index that I have created for the Oak Leaf with another librarian here and now a new editor who's doing a great job. And Bill Castine, you knew very well, of course. And Michael Levy is the one doing the technical work now. So the new edition through June of 2025 went up on Icon Sunday night. So I actually brought a copy for you that I had told you I would prepare. with how to find it on Icon and a listing of authors and yours articles from the Oak Leaf. So if you wouldn't mind me getting an email for you from the staff here, I would be able to send this on to you. And we
Oh,
thank you
sure.
so much
Oh.
for your contributions to the development of Oak Hammock. Just yesterday, we celebrated all of that here at Oak Hammock.
Well, thank you very much, Sybil. I'm very flattered, and thank you for doing the hard work of putting together indexes, and that I think that's very valuable, and I hope people use it. You know, a friend from Munich High School recently moved into a CCRC in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I visited her there. There are 800 residents, 3 huge buildings, and it is so cold socially. Oak Hammock is so rich with activities and of course I haven't lived there for 10 years more, and but my impression still is that it's a very warm, embracing place compared to this other CCRC. And I mean, I just don't understand why my friend and her husband didn't move to Oak Hammock. I mean, the costs are about the same.
Phyllis, thank you. I'm going to, and I think all of us here really appreciate your spending your time with us today. But at this point, it looks like people are ready for lunch. You know how we are.
Okay, right. Well, we're barely over breakfast, so.
Right. But thank you so very much.
All right.
And
Thank you all.
we'll look forward to you coming back and running the course in the fall.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
see you then. Okay, thank you, Sybil. I'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.